of the UNCC chapter of Ratio Christi here at UNCC. Ratio Christi, which means Reason of Christ, is a national nonprofit organization dedicated to having winsome conversations about truth, the Bible, God, Christianity, and Jesus Christ. Now, we're here today to discuss a very important issue, the problem of evil. Pardon me. I'm so sorry. So this 1 Peter 3:15 says, "Be prepared to give a defense to anyone who asks for a reason for the hope that is in you, but do so respectfully and gracefully." I'm so sorry. Now this idea of give a defense, this is known as apologetics. And apologetics is giving a defense with reason and, so sorry, everybody. Apologetics is giving a defense with reason and evidence. So we look at the Bible and we defend the Bible with evidence, and sorry everybody, can you want to take that for me? Thank y'all so much, everyone, for being patient with me.
Man, there's a bunch of you here, I gotta say. So yeah, apologetics is giving a defense for the Bible, but it's not doing it with like, hey, you should believe the Bible because it says so. All right. Now I did that a couple of times and it didn't work. So believe me, that's not a good way to do it. So we look at philosophy, we look at history, we look at science, and we try to figure out, is the Bible defensible in the first place? Does it stand up to the objections against it? And Dr. Broocks and Dr. Turek are amazing at doing this. Dr. Turek has co-authored a book. You've written I Don't Have Enough Faith to Be an Atheist, right? That's your book.
Co-authored.
Co-authored, okay, so, I mean, amazing stuff. You just wouldn't believe the depth at which these guys can go into reason and logic and show you that the Bible is not only worth thinking about, but defensible as is truth. And so it's just awesome. Ratio Christi is dedicated to doing this too. Every week we have a different topic and we try to take on these things and listen to our critics, handle the objections, and we break it down, and we love to talk about these things. And it's the only place on campus where we can do this effectively. No one else is having this conversation. And so everyone's welcome at this event. Whether you're Christian or not, you're welcome at all of our events, and we'd love to have you join the conversation. So if you'll help me give a hand in welcoming Dr. Turek here tonight, we're so happy to have you today.
I want to go back to September 29, 2006. That's when Petty Officer Michael Mansour is a United States Navy SEAL. He's operating in Ramadi, Iraq. He's standing on a roof in Ramadi, and he's standing in front of a doorway to this roof. He has two Navy SEAL colleagues, teammates, lying in the sniper-prone position near his feet. They've already taken AK-47 fire and a rocket-propelled grenade, but they're not exactly sure where the enemy is. There's a bit of a lull in the fighting. Insurgents have blocked off the streets in Ramadi, and there's someone on the loudspeaker in the town mosque saying, "Kill the Americans!" As Mansour and his team are looking for the next attack, an insurgent from an unknown location throws a grenade up on the roof. It hits Mansour in the chest, and it falls to his feet. Due to the length of the throw, there's no opportunity to pick the grenade up and throw it back. He has a split second to make a decision. He can leap through the doorway behind him and save himself, but if he does, his two colleagues lying on the roof in the sniper-prone position will surely die. Mansour yells, "Grenade!" But instead of jumping backward to save himself, he jumps forward, chest first, onto the grenade. It detonates. 30 minutes later, 25-year-old Michael Monsoor is dead. His 2 Navy SEAL colleagues only received minor injuries because Monsoor's body muffled the blast. One of them, at Monsoor's funeral, said, "Mikey looked death in the face that day and said, 'You will not take my friends, I will go in their stead.'" I've never seen a United States president cry until April 8th, 2008. That's when President George W. Bush called Monsoor's parents into the East Room to give them their son's Medal of Honor posthumously. The president couldn't even get through the citation without breaking down. Since then, Monsoor's high school in Garden Grove, California, built a new stadium. They named it Michael Monsoor Memorial Stadium. The golden trident that the SEALs wear dominates the 50-yard line. In January of this year, North Island, California, just outside of San Diego, the United States Navy commissioned the USS Michael Monsoor, the newest guided missile destroyer in the fleet, Zumwalt class. This is Monsoor's mother, Sally, being escorted onto the ship named in honor of her son. Now, why did they do this? Because Michael Monsoor literally sacrificed himself to save his friends. There's no greater love than to sacrifice yourself to save your friends, as Jesus said before he went to the cross. On this campus in April, Riley Howell sacrificed himself to save his friends. He charged the shooter, took the guy down. He saved many lives that day. But I have a question, and you have a question. Everybody in this room has a question. Everybody on this campus has a question, and the question is, why did God allow it to happen? I mean, really, if there is a good God, why would he allow such evil to occur? That's a question that every Christian needs to answer. In fact, it's every question every non-Christian needs to answer. It's a question every worldview has to deal with. Why is there evil? Now, I was scheduled to be on this campus today before the shooting happened. And we were scheduled to do I Don't Have Enough Faith to Be an Atheist, which is what I normally do on a college campus. But my friend Rice Broocks, Dr. Rice Broocks, who leads a church in Nashville. In fact, this is their image on the church in Nashville. They said, Rice said, as soon as this happened, he flew from Nashville to this campus, and 3 days after the shooting, he was on this campus because he wanted to minister to people. 2 days after 9/11, Rice Broocks was at Ground Zero because he wants to minister to people. He wants to try and help people in their greatest hour of need. Now, Rice started a series of churches, the founding churches in Nashville, but there are churches in 80 nations all over the world. And he's been on campuses all over this country and in 40 other countries as well. And when he called me and he said, "Frank, I want to come back to UNC Charlotte to minister to the students," I said, "Rice, I'm already going to be there." I said, "Why don't you just come with me and we'll do it together?" So we changed everything we were going to do tonight, and I invited Rice. So let me invite Rice up here right now. This is Dr. Rice Broocks, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you so much. In fact, I don't know if you've heard of a man by the name of David Aikman. He was the senior correspondent for Time magazine for many years, and when he went to Rice's church in Nashville, he said, "This church is the model for churches that are multi-ethnic, multi-age, diverse church that everybody in the body of Christ comes together at, as you can see by their website here. So I'd like Rice to tell us a little bit about why you wanted to come here, Rice, why you wanted to minister.
Well, first of all, thank you so much. And I love this guy. I know many of you I talked to have watched Frank's legendary campus encounters around the country. My journey into this area, many of you may have seen that I wrote a book called God's Not Dead, and I really wrote the book because there was actually a singing group in my church called the Newsboys, and they rolled up into my driveway one day and said, we've got this song called God's Not Dead. And I said, that's great. And I said, but people need more than just a song. They need reasons. So I began to write this book, God's Not Dead, and told a friend of mine I was doing it, and then he brought this movie company to me. So I ended up, the book is different from the movie, but if you saw the movie and didn't like it, I didn't want them to kill the atheist at the end. I voted, please don't do that. But anyway, so sorry for anybody who comes to be mad about that. That wasn't me. But what I did was I began to give the reasons like Frank does. If somebody says, why do you believe? You can say, well, it's because I was raised this way, or because I feel this way, or because my parents, or my grandparents have this. But for me, I grew up in church. I didn't like church. To me, Jesus was kind of a skinny guy with a sheep around his neck, and I just kind of defaulted to no thanks. But my older brother became an atheist, went on to, got a master's degree in psychology, went to SMU Law School in Dallas, and went to the top of his class. And his hobby, he so hated religion that his hobby was harassing Christians. If you said you believed, then he wanted to get you unbaptized. So I was a college athlete and, thinking I was tough, and somebody about half my size got in my face without a tic tac and began to talk to me about Jesus. And all of a sudden it was just as something clicked. The image I had that I had kind of the caricature in my mind changed. And it was just a very simple prayer that God, you're real. I wasn't some great intellectual journey and I made this great quest to find everything out. Problem is that when I said yes to God, I had to go talk to my brother. And when my brother found out that I'd become a Christian, he went into one of his suite mates there in Dallas. He said, I'm going home to get my little brother out of this born-again thing. And so my brother started studying the Bible to find all the contradictions in it. And my parents were religious, but they wanted my brother just to kind of calm me down because I seemed to be a little bit too excited about something that they figured was a passing thing. Long story short, my brother, as he began to talk to me about his objections, I certainly didn't know then what I know now, but what I was able to do was kind of pull a thread that was loose. It was almost like sometimes you have an airtight argument, maybe in a court of law. I come from a family of lawyers. We don't have family discussions, we have depositions. And but it was as if this airtight case against God seemed so seamless and seemed so unassailable until there was this one missing piece. And when I pulled that thread, the whole thing unraveled. And on the weekend that my brother came home to talk me out of my faith, we baptized him in a swimming pool in Dallas. And when he came up out of the water, he said, I don't think you've answered all my questions. He says, but I think I've been asking the wrong question. And so I graduated from Mississippi State with a degree in business, majored in accounting, and I began to go to campuses and have this discussion. So I've been doing this for 35 years. But in writing the book, God's Not Dead, I ended up here. This is the Global Atheist Convention because I don't like these caricatures. People ask me all the time, are you trying to make atheists bad and religious people good? I said, wait a minute, atheists can be good. Can religious people be bad? We know that's true. So why can atheists be good and religious people be bad? And the answer is simple, because we're all made in God's image. Just because I believe in the police, just because I believe the police exist and I know the speed limit, doesn't mean I'm going to slow down. It just makes me more culpable. But I like to listen. I want to find out exactly. Like when people tell me, people come to me all the time and they say, I don't like organized religion. I said, well, you're really like my church. We're real disorganized. You just need to come. So anyway, I do everything I can to try to lower those stumbling blocks. But this was the largest indoor gathering of atheists ever assembled. Richard Dawkins was there. Sam Harris was there. Lawrence Krauss from Arizona State. I've been to Arizona State now 3 straight years. You've been there. In fact, I like this picture because I was the creeper at the atheist convention. I like being that guy in the back because, again, I wanted to understand what you're saying. I don't like a straw man argument. But there were several contentions being made, but the central contention, when you got down to it, is this incompatibility between the existence of a good God and the presence of evil. And so we've come together. We're great friends. I have deep respect for this man and what he stands for. He's been a legend. I do events that are, on a different. I do God's Not Dead events. He does what he does. But we just said, in this case, we're going to come together to talk about this. I just hope tonight that, again, Frank, as you just step back up and kind of help my segue, I'm going to pass this. This is a mini baton. But I think, Frank, as we engage, it's not just us talking to you, but it's talking to one another. And I want, there may be things that I say, I just want you in your New Jersey way to interrupt me. I'll do the same for you in my Texas nicer fashion. There's a little bit of an abrupt,
When I'm talking, you ought to be taking notes.
Okay, that's good. But Frank, pick this up and just walk through, because I think in terms of if God, why evil, then there's some sense in which we've got to talk about, well, does God exist? In other words, people ask me all the time about the Bible, and I don't go on campus and start defending the Bible. What I say is, look, if you don't believe there's a God, then you sure don't believe he inspired a book. So let's just start with this basic premise: is does God exist? Is there something beyond the physical? Is there something beyond the material? So I don't know if that segues into what you want to say, but take it away.
I thought what we would do, and Bryce and I are going to keep going back and forth, and as he said, we may interrupt one another a little bit, but what we're going to try and do tonight is talk about this and then open it up for Q&A. Actually, it might be better, instead of Q&A, I think we're going to do all Q, no A. All right? So that takes all the pressure off us. Everyone gets to ask a question. No, we'll do Q&A at the end. But I think we're going to try and do this in 3 reasons. And Rice and I tried to put our heads together on this because it's such a huge topic. How can you cover it in, an hour, wherever we're going to be here? So I thought we'd do 3 things. The first thing we're going to try and discover is, does evil disprove God? Because a lot of people say it does. You see an awful shooting, or you see a tragedy, a hurricane, you go, where's there a good God in this? Does this disprove that God exists? And many will say yes. The second question we're going to try and answer is, why does evil exist at all? What is this thing called evil, and why does it exist? And then finally, we're going to get to the question, what's God's solution to evil? Because if evil does not disprove God, God survives this challenge, then what's his solution to it? So that's what we're going to do. Now, I need to warn you about something, that evil is not just a problem for the head, it's also a problem for the heart. And if you've been going through personally pain and suffering right now, what I might say, what Rice might say, may not resonate, because we're going to give not only we're not going to address the psychological aspects of it, but the philosophical aspects of it. And when you're going through pain and suffering, you don't need a philosopher. I get that. But I'm convinced that one of the first steps back to wholeness is for you to philosophically know that if you're going through pain and suffering and evil, that God does exist and he has a reason for it, even if you never discover what that reason is this side of eternity. Does that make sense? So we're going to start here at point 1. Does evil disprove God? And as Rice said, the first question we have to answer is, does God exist? And normally when I go on a college campus, I give evidence that God exists. I'm going to list the evidence. I don't have any time to defend it here. Okay, I'm just going to list it. You may not agree with all of it, but I think there's some arguments here that there is a spaceless, timeless, immaterial, powerful, personal, moral being out there, creator out there, who created all things and sustains all things. And what's some of the evidence for this? I think the beginning of the universe provides evidence. I think the fine-tuning of the universe provides evidence for a beginner, a fine-tuned, intelligent being. Also, the information found in DNA which is like the information we find in a software program. We know whenever there's a program, there must be a programmer. Also, life itself appears to be designed. The fact that we have consciousness and free will. Because look, if the atheists are correct, if we're just molecular machines, if everything's just physical, physics is everything, there's no immaterial realm, we're just moist robots, then we can't really know anything. We can't even know that atheism is true because we're just robots. But I think we all intuitively understand that we have free will, that we can make free will choices, and we're conscious. And this is better explained by theism than it is by atheism. Of course, the very fact that we can reason, we have intelligence, points to the fact that this is a reasonable world and there's reason behind the world. The eyewitness who wrote the Gospel of John said, in the beginning was the Logos, the Word, where we get the word logic from. This is an orderly world. It's a world that allows us to do science because it's an orderly world. So there must be an orderer out there. Also, the very laws of nature appear to be designed. They're very precise and consistent. Objective morality, which we'll talk about here in a minute. Old Testament prophecy, and of course the resurrection, and other miracles Jesus did. I think there's very good evidence to believe that the men who wrote that down, who were Jewish believers in Yahweh and had no motive to make it up, they really witnessed something that turned the world around, turned the world upside down in very short order, that Jesus actually rose from the dead. Now, what is on the other side here? Well, evil is the biggest argument against God. Now, the question is, does evil disprove God? Put it in context. You've got all this evidence here on the left. Even if you don't agree with all of it, there's good evidence over here on the left. Does evil somehow cause us to reorient our conclusions about the evidence here on this side? And my assertion is, no, evil does not disprove God. Evil actually shows God does exist. You say, that sounds counterintuitive. Why? Because evil, if it's objective, presupposes objective good, and objective good presupposes God. You see, there would be no such thing as evil unless there was good, and there'd be no such thing as good unless God existed in an objective sense. You might say, well, why is that, Frank? What is evil? Evil, actually, is a privation or a lack in good. Evil is like cancer. If you take all the cancer out of a good body, you got a better body, right? What happens if you take all the body out of the cancer? You got nothing. It doesn't exist on its own. Evil is like rust in a car. If you take all the rust out of the car, you got a better car. If you take all the car out of the rust, what do you got? A rust spot on the pavement. You got nothing, right? A totally moth-eaten garment is a hanger. In other words, it doesn't exist on its own. Evil can't exist unless good exists. But if good exists, in an objective way anyway, then God exists, because what we mean by God is that his nature is the standard of goodness. Whoever God is, that being is what we call the standard of goodness, of righteousness, of justice, of love. If he doesn't exist, you can't say evil actually exists. Yet we all know evil does exist. So therefore good must exist. C.S. Lewis, who was an atheist early on in his life, he went through World War I, a terrible war, said there can't be a good God because there's too much injustice in the world. Then one day he had an epiphany and ultimately wrote it in the book Mere Christianity. Here's what he said. He said, as an atheist, my argument against God was that the universe seems so cruel and unjust. But how had I got this idea of just and unjust? A man does not call a line crooked unless he has some idea of a straight line. What was I comparing this universe with when I called it unjust? You see, you wouldn't know what a crooked line was unless you knew what a straight line was, right? You wouldn't know what evil was unless you knew what good was. In fact, you could put it this way. The shadows prove the sunshine. In order to have shadows, you have to have sunshine. In other words, in order to have evil, you have to have good. Oh, you can have sunshine without shadows. You can have good without evil, but you can't have shadows without sunshine. You can't have evil without good. So if evil exists, God exists. I know that sounds counterintuitive. But if you think about it, philosophically, it's true. So evil doesn't disprove God. Evil may prove there's a devil out there, but it doesn't disprove God. Now, you might be surprised to find that the most prominent atheist in the world agrees with this. His name is Richard Dawkins. And if his view is true, atheistic materialism is true, here's the implications of it. He said, in a universe of blind physical forces and genetic replication, some people are going to get hurt and other people are going to get lucky, and you won't find any rhyme or reason, nor any justice. There is at the bottom no design, no purpose, no evil, and no good, nothing but blind, pitiless indifference. DNA neither knows nor cares. DNA just is, and we dance to its music. So according to atheistic materialism, the shooter was just dancing to his DNA. How can we hold him morally accountable then? Everyone in here knows that that's a great moral evil. If that's the case, there must be a standard of good by which we would even know that. So, my conclusion here is that actually evil does not belong on that side. Evil actually belongs over here, because you wouldn't even know what evil was unless you knew what good was, and you wouldn't know what good was unless God existed. Now we can ask the question, okay, Frank, okay, it doesn't get rid of God, but why would God allow it to continue? That's the next question. Why does evil even exist? I was at Michigan State. I go to a lot of colleges, as Rice said. This probably had to be 10 years ago, and I've been to Michigan State 4 or 5 times, and I was going through the I don't have enough faith to be an atheist material, and I knew there was an atheist in the audience, and he was pretty ornery because he sat through the entire presentation looking like this. And I had some pretty good jokes in there, and he didn't crack a smile once. So this went on for about 1 hour and 45 minutes, and when the presentation was over, I said, are there any questions? And immediately his hand shot up on this side of the room, and I said, yes, sir. And he said, if there is a good God, why doesn't he stop all the evil in the world? I said, sir, that is an excellent question. Maybe because if he did, he might start with you and me, because we do evil every day. You ever notice whenever we complain about evil, we never complain about ourselves? We never say, God, stop me. We're always saying, God, stop him or stop her. If God wanted to end all the evil in the world, he could. But maybe he'd start with us, because all of us do evil. And then I said, sir, that actually is a very good question, and we could spend semesters talking about it, but we don't have semesters. I want to show you a 1 minute and 46-second video that doesn't answer the problem completely, but it creates a doorway to an answer. It gives you kind of the center of the answer, if you will. And so I showed this 1 minute and 46-second video to him. And I want to show it to you right now, okay? There's a lot going on in this video. It's a kinetic video. There's a lot of movement going on. And there's a lot covered in 1 minute and 46 seconds. So you really got to pay attention. Are you ready? All right, here we go.
Is God good? He is. Why is there suffering and evil? Let's assume for the moment that God is all-powerful. This means that God can do anything that is logically possible. So he can create galaxies and subatomic particles and rainforests and you. But God cannot do what is logically impossible. He cannot make a square circle or a one-ended stick. So can God make a rock so big that he can't lift it? No. So what if, when God created human beings, he wanted them to be free? Freedom's a good thing, but if humans are to be free, they cannot be forced to obey God, because freedom without choice is like a square circle. It's a logical contradiction. No choice, no freedom. God didn't want robots. He wanted real people. The first humans endowed with the awesome power of free choice abused their freedom. The tragic consequences of their bad choice and our bad choices ripple across the world. God is responsible for the fact of freedom, but humans are responsible for their acts of freedom. But let's remember, we don't suffer alone. God will put an end to suffering and evil. And God became a man to suffer with us. God is good, and he wants real people like you to know him. But the free choice is yours.
evil exists because we have free will or we have choice, which is the only way that love could exist. You know, with the ability to do great evil, or let's just put it the opposite, the corollary, the fact that we have those that can do great good brings with it the risk of great evil. Somebody using this freedom and their imagination to figure out how they can hurt somebody. He mentioned about going, yesterday was significant because on the day I was in Nashville on 9/11, 2001, so many of you were young, very young at the time, but watching these buildings go down, and I felt this sense that I needed to drive, so I, on the 12th of September, started driving from Nashville with a team of people just to go. We got to New York on the 13th of September, and about 10 o'clock at night, and I had this thought in my mind. It's 10:30 at night, so I called Cynthia Williams, who was an NBC affiliate anchor in Nashville. And I said, Cynthia, I said, I'm sorry to disturb you, because after 9/11, everybody was just on edge. So it wasn't like I felt like anybody was asleep that early. And I said, I'm going to New York. I don't really know anybody. Do you know anybody in the New York media? And so she said, I'll call you back. So I'm starting on this long journey to New York City, which it would take us all the way to the next day, about 10 o'clock at night to get there. And she called me back and she said, there's one name. Her name was Alice Ree from MSNBC. She was Brian Williams' producer. And so when we got to we didn't get to ground zero, we got to the Armory, which was the closest you could get to ground zero on that day. And when you got into New York City on 9/11, it was, everywhere you went, it was just ashes. I mean, I rolled into Times Square and the whole place was covered in ash. The other thing that was notable was that everyone wanted to talk. There were no siloed, obviously the cell phone rage was not quite at that level like it is today, where everybody's transfixed on their phone, but yet everybody wanted to talk. You could just walk and look at somebody and they were looking for human contact. Are you okay? I'd walk into restaurants and they'd find out. I walked into Carnegie Deli and the owner named Sandy, he said, come over here. He said, these guys are the lead CBS News, and they just got some anthrax in their mail. Give them some answers. And I'm sitting there looking at the guys that produce 60 Minutes, hoping that I don't say something that's going to make me look stupid. But this Alice Ree from MSNBC, she's now since then won 2 Emmy Awards. She looked at me, she said, I was at Columbine. She said, and now here, she says, she said, I'm this close to giving up on God. She said, and then she looked at me, she said, this city is open. What are you going to do about it? Now, this may not mean anything to you, but I go back to Nashville on the Sunday after 9/11, and I stood up in my church at Bethel in Nashville, and I said, I don't know how we're going to do this. We're going to plant a congregation in Manhattan. I just and this man named Len Kiesecker, I'm giving names because they're all there. Len Kiesecker was a president of a music company, came out of the crowd. He said, I'm affiliated with a theater on Times Square. You can use it. So within a month of 9/11, I would do my 3 services on Sunday in Nashville. I would fly to New York. I did that for 1 year. But I would stand on that stage right off of 44th Street, and the crowd in a much bigger theater than this, most of them had been affected by that evil. And they weren't interested in any cute, glib answers from somebody from Nashville, Tennessee. They'd lost somebody. They knew somebody who'd lost somebody. And so this thing of evil